And the first one in is the booty shaking guilty. Welcome in. I am, unfortunately, back on my laptop to do the stream. Because I can't get to the desk to do all the organizing I need to put on the desktop. So, yeah. Like, I've got everything ready for it, then the bed next to it decided to collapse when I was trying to get everything plugged in, so I had to dismantle the bed. And now everything that was on the bed and stored is blocked in my computer desk, so now I need to get everything recleaned back up so I can get to the desk again to actually try to set up the computer in the desk. I'm guessing the sound is okay since I haven't really had to change anything on the laptop. I have had to change my fireplace audio to track 2 so it wasn't recording, which was the whole reason I'm having to redo these streams. Because YouTube was playing lads on my background and I didn't notice. When I was listening to the audio to try to edit everything else, I was getting to hear like 3 minutes worth of YouTube ads. So of course that meant my audio was useless. Because everything was coming through on the same audio channel, so yay. But anyway, we're going to retry the last 2 stories from the Rivals of Sherlock Holmes book 1. I was able to save the audio from the first of the stories last week. Oh, last year, I guess. Since I wasn't able to do anything last week either because computer. And I'm still debating on whether or not I want to use the AI generated music. The songs are cool, but I'm still iffy on using AI because, well, as much as I would love to have the money to actually get music written for my shows, channels, whatever, money is an impossibility. I'm still waiting to hear back from Disability to see if I'll even qualify for that. I still haven't heard back from any of the job applications I've put out. And quite honestly, I am completely flat fucking broke. Not really where I expected to be when turning 48 in less than 2 weeks. But here we are. I sure the hell don't sound like I'm 48. Barely sound like I'm out of my teens. Let's see, it's 9:07, so not quite time to read yet. Let's check to see what everything else is doing. Dun, 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 dun. Of course, I still haven't met my year-end goal yet. I'm sitting at 394 followers, and I was hoping to get 400. Let's see, 908. I don't know what that tapping sound is. Oh, wait, I don't know what it is. Much better. But I had something hanging on my microphone arm. It just kept tapping the microphone the entire time. But yeah, I was wanting to get 300. Well, I wanted to get 400 followers by the end of this year. 500 followers. Well, 400 by the end of last year. 500 by the end of this year. I mean, I've helped friends and everything else get up to like over 1,000. Admittedly, they're a little bit more outgoing than I am, and they stream regularly. But I'm trying to get everything set up so I can stream more often. I just have to get the other computer set up and the desk set up, tested. I mean, I just wish I could get everyone who follows me on here to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Because and I refuse to use the auto sublink. I could make one, but that's just cheating. Anyway, it is already 9:10, so it's time to get into the story. I don't have a socials one set up. I should probably do that eventually. In fact, I haven't turned on my timers yet. Okay. I'll get rid of the bonus round announcement. Okay, all my timer messages are turned back on. I turned them off for Christmas. Pretty sure all my links for everything are just down below. It's got my card, my YouTube archive. I had my 3 book affiliations. So anyway, We were reading the last story out of The Loot of Cities, The Adventures of a Millionaire in Search of Joy, by Arnold Bennet. Story number 6. Lo, 'twas a gala night. Paris, and not merely Paris, but Paris en fête. Paris decorated, Paris idle, Paris determined to enjoy itself, and succeeding brilliantly. The Venetian masts of red and gold lined the gay pavements of the grand boulevards and the Avenue de l'Opera, and suspended from these in every direction, transverse and lateral, hung garlands of flowers whose petals were of colored paper, and whose hearts were electric globes that in the evening would burst into flame. The effect of the city's toilets reached the extremes of opulence, for no expense had been spared. Paris was welcoming monarchs, and had spent 2,000,000 francs in obedience to the maximum that was what it was worth doing. At all was worth doing well. The Grand Hotel, with its 800 rooms full of English and Americans at the upper end of the Avenue de l'Opera, looked down at the Grand Hotel de Louvre, with its 400 rooms full of English and Americans at the lower end of the Avenue de l'Opera. These two establishments had the best views in the whole city, and perhaps the finest view of all was that obtainable from a certain second-floor window of the Grand Hotel, precisely at the corner of the Boulevard des Chapons and the Rue Ambert. From this window one could see the boulevards in both directions, the Opera, the Place de l'Opera, the Avenue de l'Opera, and the Rue de Quartier Saint-André, and the multitudinous life of these vivid thoroughfares, the glittering cafes, the dazzling shops, the painted kiosks, the lumbering omnibuses, the gliding trams, the hooting automobiles, the swift and careless cabs, the private carriages, the suicidal bicycles, the newsmen, the toy sellers, the touts, the beggars, and all the holiday crowd, somber men and radiant women chattering, laughing, bustling, staring, drinking, under the innumerable tricolors of garlands of paper flowers. That particular view was a millionaire's view, and it happened to be the temporary property of Cecil Thorold, who was enjoying the afternoon sun at an open window with 3 companions. Eve Fincastle looked at it with the analytic eye of a journalist, while Kitty Sartoris was quite proper for an actress, deemed it a sort of frame for herself as she leaned over the balcony like a Juliet on stage. The third guest in Cecil's sitting room was Lionel Belmont, the Napoleonic Anglo-American theatrical manager, in whose crown Kitty herself was the chief star. Mr. Belmont, a big, burly, but good-humored, shrewd man of something over 40, said he had come to Paris on business. But for 2 days the business had been solely to look after Kitty Sartoris and the minister to her caprices. At the present moment his share of the view consisted mainly of Kitty, in the same way Cecil's share of the view consisted mainly of Eve Fincastle. But this at least was right and decorous, for the betrothal of the millionaire and the journalist had been definitely announced. Otherwise Eve would have gone back to work at Fleet Street a week ago. "The Gala performance is tonight, isn't it?" said Eve, gazing at the vast and superbly ornamented opera house. "Yes," said Cecil. "What a pity we can't be there. I should have so liked to see the young queen in evening dress, and they say that the interior decorations—" "Nothing simpler," said Cecil. "If you want to go, dear, let us go." Kitty Sartoris looked round quickly. "Mr. Belmont is trying to get seats and can't. Haven't you, Belle? You know the whole audience is invited. The invitations are issued by the Minister of Fine Arts." "Still, in Paris anything can be got for paying for it." "My dear young friend," said Lionel Belmont, "I guess if seats were to be had, I should have struck 1 or 2 yesterday. I put no limit on the price, and I reckon I ought to know what theatre prices run to." Over at the Metropolitan in New York, I've seen a box change hands at $200 for one night. Nevertheless, Cecil began again. And the performance starting at 6 hours from now, Lionel Belmont exclaimed. Not much. But Cecil persisted. Seen the Herald today? Belmont questioned. No? Well, listen. This is going to interest you. He drew a paper from his pocket and read, Seats for the Opera Gala. The traffic and seats of the Sale performance at the opera during the last royal visit to Paris aroused considerable comment and not a little dissatisfaction. Nothing, however, was done, and the traffic to seats for tonight's spectacle at which the President and Her Imperial Majesties will be present has, it has said, amounted to a scandal. Of course, the offer so suddenly made 5 days ago by Madame Felice and Mademoiselle Malva, the two greatest living dramatic sopranos, to take part in the performance immediately after enormously intensifying interest in the affair, for never yet have these two supreme artists appeared in the same theatre on the same night. No theatre could afford the luxury. Our readers may remember that in our columns, in the columns of the Figaro, there appeared 4 days ago an advertisement to the following effect. A box, also 2 orchestra stalls for the Opera Gala, to be disposed of owing to illness. Apply 155 Rue de la Paix. We sent 4 several reporters to answer that advertisement. The first was offered a stage box for 7,500 francs, and 2 orchestra stalls in the second row for 1,250 francs. The second was offered a box opposite the stage on the second tier and 2 stalls on the 7th row. The third had a chance for 4 stalls in the back row and was a small box just behind them. The fourth was offered something else. The thing was obvious, therefore, a regular agency. Everybody is asking, how were these seats obtained? From the Ministry of Fine Arts or from the invites? Echo answers, how? The authorities, however, are stated to have interfered at last and to have put an end to this buying and selling of what should be an honorable distinction. Bravo, said Cecil. And that's so, Belmont remarked, dropping the paper. I went to 155 Rue de la Paix myself yesterday, and was told that nothing whatsoever was to be had, and not at any price. Perhaps you didn't offer enough, said Cecil. Moreover, I noticed the advertisement does not appear today. I guess the authorities have crumpled it up. Still, Cecil went monotonously. Look here, said Belmont, grim and a little nettled. Just to cut it short, I'll bet you $200 dinner at Poward's that you can't get seats for tonight. Not even 2, let alone 4. You really want to bet? Well, drawled Belmont with a certain irony, slightly imitating Cecil's manner, it means something to eat for these ladies. I accept, said Cecil, and he rang the bell. Part 2. Lucky, Cecil said to his valet, who had entered the room, I want you to go to number 155 Rue de la Paix and find out on which floor they're disposing of seats for the opera tonight. When you have found out, I want you to get me 4 seats, preferably a box. Understand? The servant stared at his master, squinting violently for a few seconds. Then he replied suddenly, as though light had just dawned on him. Exactly, sir. You intend to be present at the gala performance. You have successfully grasped my attentions, said Cecil. Present my card. He scribbled a word or 2 on the card and gave it to the man. And the price, sir? You still have that blank check from Credit Lyonnaise that I gave you yesterday morning. Use that. Yes, sir. Then there's the question of my French, sir, my feeble French and delicate plant. My friend, Belmont put in, I will accompany you as an interpreter. I should like to see this thing through. Lucky bowed and gave up squinting. In 3 minutes, for they only had to go around the corner, Lionel Belmont and Lecky were in a room on the 4th floor of 155 Rue de la Paix. It had an appearance of an ordinary drawing room, save that it contained an office table, and at this table sat a young man, French. "Your wish, messieurs," said the young man. "Have you the goodness to interpret for me," said Lucky to the Napoleon of the Anglo-Saxon theatres. "Mr. Cecil Thorold, of Devonshire Mansion, London, the Grand Hotel, Paris, the Grand Continental, Rome, and the Gezira Palace Hotel, Cairo, presents his compliments and wishes a box for the gala performance at the opera tonight." Belmont translated, while Lucky handed the card. "Owing to the unfortunate disposition of the minister and his wife," replied the young man gravely, having perused the card, "it happens that I have a stage box in the 2nd tier." "You told me yesterday," Belmont began. "I will take it," said Lucky, in a sort of French interpreter his interrupting. "The price and a pen." "The price is 25,000 francs. "Gemini!" Belmont exclaimed in American. "This is Paris and no mistake." "Yes," said Lucky, as he filled up the blank check. "Paris still succeeds in being Paris. I have noticed it before, Mr. Belmont, and if you will pardon the liberty—" The young man opened a drawer and handed to Lucky a magnificent gift card, signed by the Minister of Fine Arts, which Lucky hid within his breast pocket. "The signature of the minister is genuine, eh?" Belmont asked the young man. "I will answer for it," said the young man, smiling imperturbably. "The deuce you do," Belmont murmured, for the 4 friends dined at Pallard's at the rate of about $1.50 a mouthful. At the rate of $1.50 a mouthful, and the mystified Belmont, who was not in the habit of being mystified, and so felt it, had an ecstasy of paying the bill. Part 3. It was 9 o'clock when they entered the magnificent precincts of the Opera House. Like everybody else, they went very early. The performance was not to commence until 9:30, in order to see and be seen to the fullest possible extent. A week had elapsed since the 2 girls had arrived in Algiers and Paris, under the escort of Cecil Thorold, and in that time they had not been idle. Kitty Sartoris had spent tolerable sums at the best modistes in the Rue de la Paix, and the establishments in the Rue de la Chasse d'Antin, while Eve had bought 1 frock, a dream, needless to say, and had also been nearly covered in jewelry by her betrothed. That afternoon, between the bet and the dinner, Cecil had made more than one mysterious disappearance. He finally came back with a diamond tiara for his dear journalist. "You ridiculous thing!" exclaimed the dear journalist, kissing him. It thus occurred that Eve, usually so severe of aspect, had more jewels than she could wear, while Kitty, accustomed to display, had practically nothing but her famous bracelet. Eve insisted on pooling the lot and dividing it equally for the gala. Consequently, the party presented a very pretty appearance as it ascended the celebrated grand staircase of the opera, wreathed tonight with flowers. Lionel Belmont, with Kitty on his arm, was in high spirits, uplifted, joyous, but Cecil himself seemed to have been a little nervous, and this nervousness communicated itself to Eve Fincastle. Or perhaps Eve was rather overpowered by her tiara. At the head of the staircase was a notice requesting everyone to be seated at 9:25, previous to the arrival of the President and the imperial guests of the Republic. The row of officials at the control took the expensive gift card from Cecil, examined it, returned it, and bowed low with an intimation that he should turn to the right and climb 2 floors. And the party proceeded further into the interior of the great building. The immense corridors and foyers and stairs were crowded with a collection of the best-known people and the best-dressed people. and the most wealthy people in Paris. It was a gathering of all renowns. The garish, gorgeous opera seemed to be changed into that night something new and strange. Even those shabby old harridans, the box openers, the hors d'oeuvres, wore bows of red, white, and blue, and smiled festively in expectation of tips inconceivably large. "Tens!" exclaimed the box operator who had taken charge of Cecil's party, and she unlocked the door of the box. And well might she exclaim, for the box, number 74, so no possible error, was already occupied by a lady and two gentlemen, who were talking rather loudly in French. Cecil undoubtedly turned pale, while Lionel Belmont laughed within his mustache. "These people must have made a mistake," Cecil said to the overtures, when a male official in evening dress approached them with an air of importance. "Pardon, monsieur, you are Monsieur Cecil Threshold?" "I am," said Cecil. "Will you kindly follow me? Monsieur le Directeur wishes to see you." "You are expected, evidently," said Lionel Belmont. The girls kept apart, as girls should in these crises between men. "I have a ticket for the box," Cecil remarked to the official, "and I wish to be first to take possession of it." "It is precisely that point which Monsieur the Director wishes to discuss with Monsieur," rejoined the official, ineffably suave. He turned with a wonderful bow to the girls, and added, with the politeness of which the French alone have the secret, "Perhaps in the meantime these ladies would like to see the view of the Avenue de l'Opera from the balcony. The illuminations have begun, and the effect is certainly charming." Cecil bit his lip. "Yes," he said. "Belmont, take them." So, while Lionel Belmont escorted the girls to the balcony, there to discuss the startling situation and to watch the Imperial party drive up in resplendent, fairy-like, and unique avenue, Cecil followed the official. He was guided along various passages and round unnumbered corners to the rear part of the colossal building. There, in a sumptuous bureau, the official introduced him to a still higher official, the Directeur, who had the decoration and a long white mustache. "Monsieur," said the latter, "I am desolated to have to inform you that the Minister of Fine Arts has withdrawn his original invitation for box number 74 tonight." "I have received no intimation of this withdrawal," replied Cecil. "No, because the original invitation was not issued to you," said the director, excited and nervous. "The Minister of Fine Arts instructs me to inform you that his invitation to meet the President and the Imperial Majesties cannot be bought and sold." "But is it not notorious that many such invitations have been bought and sold?" "It is unfortunately too notorious." Here the director looked at his watch, and the bell rang impatiently. "Then why am I singled out?" The director gazed blandly at Cecil. "The reason, perhaps, is best known to yourself," said he, and he rang the bell again. "I appear to incommodate you," Cecil remarked. "Permit me to retire." "Not at all, I assure you," said the director. "On the contrary, I am a little agitated on account of the non-arrival of Mademoiselle Malva." A minor functionary entered. "He has come?" "No, Monsieur le Directeur." "And it is 9:15. Sapristi!" "They are fun, Mathieu." The functionary departed. "The invitation to box number 74, proceeded the director, commanding himself, was sold for 2,000 francs. Allow me to hand you note for the amount, dear monsieur." "But I paid 25,000, said Cecil smilingly. It is conceivable, but the minister can only concern himself with the original figure. To refuse the notes? By no means, said Cecil, accepting them. But I've brought here tonight 3 guests, including 2 ladies. Imagine my position. I'll imagine it, the director responded. But you will not deny that the minister has always the right to cancel an invitation. Seats ought to be sold subject to the contingency of the right being exercised. At that moment, still another official plunged into the room. She is not here yet, he sighed as if in extremity. It is unfortunate, Cecil sympathetically put in. It is more than unfortunate, dear monsieur, said the director, gesticulating. It is unthinkable. The performance must begin at 9:30, and it must be the garden scene from Faust, in which Mademoiselle Malva takes Marguerite. Why not change the order, Cecil suggested. Impossible. There are only 2 other items, the first act of Lohengrin, with Madame Felice, and the ballet Silver. We cannot commence with the ballet. No one would ever heard of such a thing. And you suppose Felice will sing before Malva? Not for millions, not for a throne. The etiquette of sopranos is stricter than that of the courts. Besides, tonight we cannot have a German opera preceding a French one. Then the President and their Majesties will have to wait a little while till Malva arrives, said Cecil. Their Majesties wait? Impossible! Impossible! Echoed the other official aghast. 2 more officials entered, and the atmosphere of alarm, of being scotched, of being up a tree of incredible height, the atmosphere at which the moment permeated the whole of the vast region behind the scenes of the Paris Opera seemed to rush with them in the bureau of the director, and to concentrate itself there. 9:20, and she couldn't dress in less than 15 minutes. Have you sent to the Hotel de Louvre? The director questioned despairingly. Yes, monsieur the director. She left there 2 hours ago. Cecil coughed. I could have told you as much, he remarked very distinctly. What? Cried the director. You know Mademoiselle Malva? She is among my intimate friends, said Cecil smoothly. Perhaps you know where she is. I have a most accurate idea, said Cecil. There. I will tell you when I am seated in my box with my friends, Cecil answered. Dear monsieur, answered the director. Tell us at once. I give you my word to honor that you shall have your box. Cecil bowed. Certainly, he said. I may remark that I had gathered information which led to anticipate the difficulty with the Minister of the Fine Arts. But Malva, where is she? Be at ease. It is only 9:23, and Mademoiselle Malva is less than 3 minutes away, and already dressed. I was observing that I had gathered information which led me to anticipate this difficulty with the Minister of Fine Arts, and accordingly I took measures to protect myself. There is no such thing as an absolute arbitrary power, dear director, even in the Republic, and I have proved it. Mademoiselle Malva is in room 429 at the Grand Hotel, across the road. Stay, she will not come without this note. He handed a small folded letter from his waistcoat pocket. Then he added, Adieu, monsieur le directeur. You have just time to reach the state entrance in order to welcome the presidential and imperial party. At 9:30, Cecil and his friends were ushered into the trinity of subservient officials into their box, which had previously been occupied by its other occupants. At the same moment, the monarchs, with monarchical punctuality, accompanied by the president, entered the presidential box in the middle of the grand tier of the superb auditorium. The distinguished and dazzling audience rose to its feet, and the band played the national anthem. You fix it up, then, Belmont whispered, under cover of the national anthem. He was beaten, after all. Oh, yes, said Cecil. A trivial misconception, nothing more, and I have made a little out of it, too. Indeed. Much? Oh, not much. 2,000 francs. But you must remember that I have been less than half an hour in making them. The curtain rose on the garden scene from Faust. Part 4. My dear, said Eve, when a woman is definitely linked with a man, either by betrothal or by marriage, there are moments, especially at the commencement, which she assumes an air and a tone of absolute exclusive possession of him. It is a wonderful trick which no male can successfully imitate, no matter how hard he tries. One of these moments had arrived in the history of Eve Filncastle and her millionaire lover. They sat in a large, deserted public room, all gold of the Grand Hotel. It was midnight, less a quarter, and they had just returned somewhat excited and flushed from the glories of the Gala performances. During the latter part of the evening, Eve had been absent from Cecil's box for nearly half an hour. Katie Sartorius and Lionel Belmont were conversing in the adjoining salon. Etaka. Yes, said Cecil. Are you quite sure that you love me? Only one answer is possible to such a question, and Cecil gave it. That is all very well, Eve persuaded, with equal gravity and charm, but it was really tremendously sudden, wasn't it? I can't think of what you see in me, dearest. My dear Eve, Cecil observed, holding her hand, the best things, the most enduring things, very often appear suddenly. Say you love me, she persisted. So he said it, this time. Then her gravity deepened through her smile. You've given up on all those schemes and things of yours, haven't you? She questioned. Oh, absolutely, he replied. My dear, I'm so glad. I never could understand why. Listen, he said. What was I to do? I was rich, I was bored, I had no great attainments. I was interested in life and in the arts, but not desperately, not vitally. You may perhaps say I should have taken up philanthropy. Well, I'm not built for that way. I can't help it. I'm not a born philanthropist, and a philanthropist without a gift of philanthropy usually does vastly more harm than good. I might have gone into business. Well, I should only have doubled my millions while boring myself all the time. Yet the instinct which I inherited from my father, the great American instinct to be a little cleverer and smarter than someone else, drove me into action. It's just part of my character, and one can't get away from one's character. So finally I took these rather original schemes, as you call them. They had the advantage of being exciting and sometimes dangerous, and though often very profitable, they were not too profitable. In short, they amused me and gave me joy. They also gave me you. Eve smiled again, but without committing herself. But you have abandoned them now completely? Ah, yes, he replied. Then what about the opera affair tonight? She sprang the question on him sharply, and she did her best to look severe, but the endeavor ended with a laugh. I meant to tell you, he said, but how? How did you know? How did you guess? You forgot that I am still a journalist, she said, and still on the staff of my paper. I wished to interview Malva tonight for the journal, and I did so. It was she who let things out. She thought I knew about it, and when she saw that I didn't, she stopped and advised me to mysteriously consult you for details. It was the scandal of the Gala performance last autumn, and gave me action in making the corner of seats the very next Gala performance that should ever occur in the Paris Opera. Cecil began his confession. I knew the seats could be got direct from more or less officials in the Ministry of Fine Arts, and that a large portion of the people invited to these performances were prepared to sell their seats. You can't imagine how venal certain circles are in Paris. It just happened that the details of tonight's performance were announced on the day we arrived there. I could not resist the chance. Now you comprehend sundry strange absences of mine during the week. I went to a reporter in the Echo de Paris, whom I knew and who knows everybody, and we went out on a list of people likely to be invited and likely to be willing to sell their seats. We also opened negotiations at the ministry. How on earth do these ideas occur to you? Said Eve. Can I tell you, Cecil answered. It is because they occur to me that you see. Well, in 24 hours, my reporter and my two friends interviewed half the interviewable people in Paris, and the Minister of Fine Arts had sent out his invitations, and I had obtained refusal over 300 seats, at a total cost of about 75,000 francs. Then I saw my friend, the incomparable Malva, was staying at the Ritz, and the keystone of the entire affair presented itself to me. I got her to offer to sing. Of course, her rival Felice could not be behind her in the patriotic desire to cement the friendliness of the two great nations. The Gala performance blossomed into a terrific boon. We took a kind of office in the Rue de la Paix. We advertised very discreetly. Every morning, after bidding you good night, I saw my reporter Lecky and arranged the development of the campaign. In 3 days we had sold all our seats except one box, which I kept for something like 200,000 francs. Then this afternoon you merely bought the box from yourself. That is all. Exactly, my love, and I meant the surprise of getting a box to come to a little later than it did, at dinner, but you and Belmont, between you, forced it on. That is all. Not quite. The minions of the Minister of Fine Arts were extremely cross, and they meant to revenge themselves on me somehow by depriving me of my box at the last moment. However, I got wind of that, and by the simplest possible arrangement with Malva, I protected myself. The scheme, my last bachelor feigned leave, had been a great success, and the official world of Paris has been taught a lesson which has made lead to excellent results. And you have cleared 125,000 francs. By no means. The profits of these undertakings are at least part of them. The expenses are heavy. I reckon the expenses will be nearly 40,000 francs. Then I must give Malva a necklace, and that necklace must cost 25,000 francs. That leaves 60,000 clear, said Eve. Say 62,000. Why? I was forgetting the extra 2,000 I made just this evening. And your other schemes? Eve continued her cross-examination. How much have they yielded? Well, the Devonshire House scheme was a dead loss. My dear, why did you lead on to destroy that 50,000 pounds? Waste not, want not. There may come a day when we shall need that 50,000 pounds, and then— Don't be funny, said Eve. I am serious. Very serious. Well, Ostend and Mr. Renshaw yielded 21,000 pounds net. Berger's and the bracelet yielded 9,500 francs, and Algiers and Biskra resulted in a loss of— Never mind the losses, Eve interrupted. Are there any more gains? Cecil consulted his pocketbook. A trifle, he answered. Between 38 and 40,000 pounds. My dear Cecil, the girl said, call it 40,000, 1,000,000 francs, and give me a cheque. Do you mind? I shall be charmed, my darling. And then when we get to London, Eve finished, I will hand it over to the hospital anonymously. He paused, gazed at her, then kissed her. Then Kitty Sartoris entered a marvelous vision with Belmont in her wake. Kitty glanced hesitatingly at the massive and good-natured Lionel. The fact is, said Kitty and paused. We are engaged, said Lionel. You aren't surprised? Warmest congratulations, Cecil observed. No, we can't truthfully say that we are staggered. It is the secret nature of things that a leading lady must marry her manager, a universal law that may not be transgender. Moreover, said Eve later, in Cecil's private ear as they were separating the night, we might have guessed much earlier. Theatrical managers don't go scattering 500-pound bracelets all over the place merely for business reasons. But he only scattered one, my dear, Cecil murmured. Yes, well, that's what I mean. Okay. I will not weigh in on the theater managers having to marry the leading lady, but it does seem pretty common. Okay, let's see. I may cut the break a little early because, well, this last story, I don't think it's really that much longer. Let's see, it's 44. Oh, that's only 5 pages. So it's going to be a short stream tonight. But thank you all for coming in. But I don't want to risk it getting interrupted, so I will go ahead and do the ads now just to get them out of the way. So I will see you all in a few minutes. Welcome back. Okay, we have one story left in this one. I was noticing that my model was acting up. It's because the cable for my microphone was dangling in front of my camera. But as I mentioned in chat, our final story is an H.G. Wells story. And then we'll be done with this book. Again. And hopefully I'll get all the pronunciations right in this one. This time. Though I am kind of wondering about this one. It's not so much a mystery as it is a farce. And for some reason, this book has it under two different titles. Because part of it, it's like the title page of it says The Hammerpond Mystery by H.G. Wells. But the actual title The Hammerpond Park Burglary, A Tale of an Artistic Crime by H.G. Wells. It is a moot point whether burglary is to be considered a sport, a trade, or an art. For a trade, the technique is scarcely rigid enough, and it claims to be considered an art. And its claims to be considered an art are... the printing on this book is really bad, so it's missing words. Sorry for that. It is a moot point whether burglary is to be considered as a sport, a trade, or an art. For a trade, the technique is scarcely rigid enough, and its claims to be considered an art are initiated by the mercenary element that qualifies its triumphs. On the whole, it seems to be most likely ranked as a sport for which no rules are at present formulated, and of which the prizes are distributed in an extremely informal manner. It was this informality of burglary that led to the regrettable extinction of two promising beginners at Hammerpond Park. The stakes offered in this affair consisted chiefly of diamonds and of other personal bric-a-brac belonging to a newly married Lady Aveling. Lady Aveling, as the reader will remember, was the only daughter of Mrs. Montague Pangs, the well-known hostess. Her marriage to Lord Aveling was extensively advertised in the papers, as well as the quantity and quality of her wedding presents, and the fact that the honeymoon was to be spent at Hammerpond. The announcement of these valuable prizes created a considerable sensation in the small circle in which Mr. Teddy Watkins was the undisputed leader, and it was decided that, accompanied by a duly qualified assistant, he should visit the village of Hammerpond in his professional capacity. Being a man of naturally retiring and modest disposition, Mr. Watkins determined to make his visits incognito, and after due consideration of the conditions of his enterprise, he selected the role of a landscape artist and the unassuming surname of Smith. He preceded his assistant, who, it was decided, should join him only after the last afternoon of his stay at Hammerpond. Now, the village of Hammerpond is, perhaps, one of the prettiest little corners of Sussex. Many thatched houses still survive. The flint-built church with its tall spire nestling under the down is one of the finest and least restored in the country, and the beech woods and the bracket jungles through which the road runs to the great house are singularly rich in what the vulgar artist and photographer call bits. So that Mr. Watkins, on his arrival with two virgin canvases and a brand new easel, a paint box, a portmanteau, and an ingenious little ladder made of sections, after the pattern of the late lamented master, Charles Peace, a crowbar and wire coils, found himself welcomed with effusion and some curiosity by half a dozen other brethren of the brush. It rendered the disguise he had chosen inexplicably plausible, but it inflicted upon him a considerable amount of aesthetic conversation for which he was very imperfectly prepared. "Have you exhibited very much?" said a young portion at the bar parlor of the Coach and Horses, where Mr. Watkins was skillfully accumulating local information on the night of his arrival. "A little, yes," said Mr. Watkins. "Just a snack here and there." "Academy?" "In course, and the Crystal Palace." "Didn't they hang you well?" said Porson. "Don't rot," said Mr. Watkins. "I don't like it." "I mean, did they put you in a good place?" "What do you mean?" said Mr. Watkins suspiciously. "One would think you were trying to make it out to have been put away." Porson had been brought up by aunts, and was a very gentlemanly young man, even for an artist. He did not know what being put away meant, but he thought it was best to explain that he intended nothing of the sort. At the question of hanging seemed a sore point with Mr. Watkins, he tried to divert the conversation a little. "Do you do figure work at all?" "No, never had the head for figures," said Mr. Watkins. "My Mrs. Smith, does all that." "She paints too," said Porson. "That's rather jolly." "Very," said Mr. Watkins, though he really did not think so, and feeling the conversation was drifting a little beyond his grasp, added, "I came down here to paint Hammerpond house by moonlight." "Really?" said Porson. "That's a rather novel idea." "Yes," said Mr. Watkins. "I thought it a rather good notion when it occurred to me. I expect to begin tomorrow night." "What? You don't mean to paint in the open, by night?" "I do, though." "But how will you see our canvas?" "Have a bloomin' corpse," began Mr. Watkins, rising too quickly to the question, and then, realizing this, bowed to Miss Durgan for another glass of beer. "I'm going to have a thing called a dog lantern," he said to Porson. "But it's a new moon now," objected Porson. "There won't be any moon." "There'll be the house," said Watkins. "At any rate, I'm going, you see, to paint the house first and the moon afterwards." "Oh," said Porson, too staggered to continue the conversation. "I do say," said old Durgan, their landlord, who had maintained a respectful silence during the technical conversation, "as there's no less than 3 policemen Asworth on duty every night in the house, count of the Lady Owing and her jewellery. One of 'em foul and 6 last night. Off second footman tossin'." Towards sunset next day, Mr. Watkins' virgin canvas easel and a very considerable case of other appliances in hand strolled up the pleasant pathway through the beech woods to Hammerpond Park, and pitched his apparatus in a strategic position commanding the house. Here he was observed by Mr. Raffles, who was returning across the park from a study in chalk pits. His curiosity having been fired by Porson's account of the new arrival, he turned aside with the idea of discussing nocturnal art. Mr. Watkins was apparently unaware of his approach. The friendly conversation with Lady Hammerpond's butler had just terminated, and that individual, surrounded by 3 pet dogs, which it was the duty to take out for an airing after dinner, had been served, and receded into the distance. Mr. Watkins had been mixing color with a great air of industry. Sant, approaching more nearly, was surprised to see the color in question was as brash and brilliant emerald green as possible to imagine. Having cultivated an extreme sensibility to color from his earliest years, it drew the air sharply between his teeth, and at the very first glimpse of his brew, Mr. Watkins turned around. He looked annoyed. "What on earth are you going to do with that beastly green?" said Sant. Mr. Watkins realized that his zeal to appear busy in the eyes of the butler had evidently betrayed him into some technical error. He looked at Sant and hesitated. "Pardon my rudeness," said Sant, "but really that green is altogether too amazing. It came as a shock. What do you mean to do with it?" Mr. Watkins was collecting his resources. Nothing could save the situation but decision. "If you come here interrupting my work," he said, "I'm going to have to paint your face with it." Sant retired, for he was a humorist and a peaceful man. Going down the hill, he met Porson and Wainwright. "Either that man is a genius or he's a dangerous lunatic." And he continued his way, his countenance brightened by a pleasant anticipation of a cheerful array round the easel and the gloaming, and the shedding of much green paint. But Porson and Wainwright, Mr. Watkins was less aggressive, and explained that the green was intended to be the first coating of his picture. It was, he admitted in response to the remark, an absolutely new method invented by himself. But subsequently he became more reticent. He explained he was not going to tell every passer-by the secret of his own particular style, and added some scathing remarks upon the meanness of people hanging about, and to pick up such tricks as masters as they could, which immediately relieved him of their company. Twilight deepened. First one, then another star appeared. The rooks amid the tall trees to the left of the house had long since lapsed into slumberous silence. The house itself lost all details of its architecture and began a dark gray outline. And then the windows of the salon shone out brilliantly. The conservatory was lighted up, and here and there a bedroom window burned yellow. Had anyone approached the easel at the park, would have found it deserted, with a brief uncivil word in brilliant green sullied the purity of the canvas. Mr. Watkins was busy in the shrubbery with his assistant, who had discreetly joined them from the carriage drive. Mr. Watkins was inclined to be self-congratulatory upon the ingenious device by which he had carried all his apparatus boldly, and in the sight of all men, right up to the scene of operations. "That's the dressing room," he said to his assistant, "and as soon as the maid takes the candle away and goes to supper, we'll call in. My, how nice the house do look, to be sure, against the starlight, and with the windows and lights. Swope me, Jim, I almost wish I was a painter chap. Have you fixed the wire across the path from the laundry?" He cautiously approached the house until he stood below the dressing-room window, and began to put together his folding ladder. He was too much experienced a practitioner to feel any unusual excitement. Jim was reconnoitering the smoking room. Suddenly, close behind Mr. Watkins in the bushes, there was a violent crash and a stifled curse. Someone had tumbled over the wire which his assistant had just arranged. He heard feet running on the gravel pathway beyond. Mr. Watkins, like all true artists, was a singularly shy man, and he incontinently dropped his folding ladder and began running circumspectly through the shrubbery. He was instinctively aware of two people hot upon his heels, and he fancied that he distinguished the outline of his assistant in front of him. In another moment he had vaulted the low stone wall bounding the shrubbery, and was in the open park. Two thuds on the turf followed his own leap. It was a close chase in the darkness through many trees. Mr. Watkins was a loosely built man, and in good training, and he gained hand over hand upon the hoarsely panting figure in front. Neither spoke, but Mr. Watkins pulled up alongside. A qualm of awful doubt came over him. The other man turned his head at the same moment and gave an exclamation of surprise. "It's not Jim," thought Mr. Watkins, and simultaneously the stranger flung himself, as it were, at Watkins' knees, and they were forthwith grappling on the ground together. "Lend a hand, Bill!" cried the stranger as the third man caught up. And Bill did. 2 hands, in fact, and some accentuated feet. The fourth man, presumably Jim, had apparently turned aside and made off for a different direction. At any rate, he did not join the trio. Mr. Watkins' memory of the incidents for the next 2 minutes is extremely vague. He has a dim recollection of having his thumb in the corner of the mouth of the first man and feeling anxious about its safety, and for some seconds he at least held the head of the gentleman answering to the name of Bill to the ground by the hair. He was also kicked a great number of different places, apparently in a vast multitude of people. Then the gentleman who was not Bill got to his knee below Mr. Watkins' diaphragm and tried to curl him up upon it. When his sensations came less entangled, he was sitting upon the turf, and 8 or 10 men, the night was dark, and he was rather too confused to count, were standing around him, apparently waiting for him to recover. He mournfully assumed that he was captured, and would probably have made some philosophical reflections on the fickleness of fortune, had not his internal sensations disinclined him for speech. He noticed very quickly that his wrists were not handcuffed. Then a flask of brandy was put to his hands. He touched him a little, and it was an unexpected kindness. "He's a-comin' around," said a voice which he had fancied recognized belonged to the Hammerpond second footman. "We've got them, sir, both of them," said the Hammerpond butler, the man who had handed him the flasks. "Thanks to you." No one answered this remark, yet he failed to see how it applied to him. "He's fair dazed," said the strange voice. "The villains half murdered him." Mr. Teddy Watkins decided to remain fair dazed until he had a better grasp of the situation. He perceived that 2 of the black figures around him stood side by side with a dejected air, and there was something in the carriage of the shoulders that suggested to his experienced eyes that they were bound together. 2. In a flash he rose to position. He emptied the little flask and staggered. Obsequious hands assisted him to his feet. There was a sympathetic murmur. "Shake hands, sir, shake hands," said one of the figures to him. "Permit me to introduce myself. I am greatly indebted to you. It was the jewels of my wife, Lady Aveling, which attracted these scoundrels to the house." "I'm very glad to meet your lordship's acquaintance." "I presume you saw the rascals walking for the shrubbery and dropped down on them." "Yes, that's exactly what happened," said Mr. Watkins. "You should have waited till they got to the window," said Lord Aveling. "They could get it hotter if they had actually committed the burglary. And it was lucky for you 2 of the policemen were out of the gates and followed you up to 3 of you. I doubt if you could have secured 2 of them, though it was confoundedly plucky of you all the same." Yes, I ought to have thought of that," said Mr. Watkins. "But one can't think of everything." "Certainly not," said Lord Aveling. "I'm afraid they have mauled you a little," he added. The party was now moving towards the house. "You walk rather lame. May I offer you my arm?" And instead of entering Hammerpond House by the dressing-room window, Mr. Watkins entered it, slightly intoxicated and inclined to cheerfulness again, on the arm of a real live peer, and by the front door. "This," thought Mr. Watkins, "is burgling in style." The scoundrels, seen by the gaslight, proved to be mere local amateurs unknown to Mr. Watkins, and they were taken down to the pantry, and there watched over by the 3 policemen, 2 gamekeepers with loaded guns, the butler, an ostler, and a carman, until dawn allowed of their removal to the Hazelhurst police station. Mr. Watkins was made much of the inn salon. They devoted a sofa to him, and would not hear of a return to the village that night. Lady Aveling was sure he was brilliantly original, and said her idea of Turner was just another rough, half-inbreeded, deep-eyed, brave, and clever man. Someone brought up a remarkable little folding ladder that had been picked up in the shrubbery, and showed him how it was put together. Then they described how wires had been found in the shrubbery, evidently placed there to trip up anywhere passerbys. It was lucky he had escaped those snares, and they showed him the jewels. Mr. Watkins had the sense not to talk much, and any conversational difficulty fell back on his internal pains. At last he was seized with stiffness in the back and yawning. Everyone suddenly awoke to the fact that it was a shame to keep him talking after his array, so he retired early to his room, the little red room next to Lord Eveling's suite. The dawn found a deserted easel bearing a canvas with a green inscription in the Hammerpond Park. It found the Hammerpond house in commotion. But if the dawn found Mr. Teddy Watkins and Eveling Diamonds, it did not communicate the information to the police. Okay. Now I got it read. As I said, it was probably going to be a short stream tonight, because I just wanted to get those two stories taken care of. So I thank everyone for coming in. I am definitely hoping next week, hopefully, I'll be on the U Tower again. I just have to get, everything rewired and put onto the right desk, as opposed to it haphazardly being sitting on the desk I've got on now. So, let's see who's on to raid. Ouch. If anyone asks, no, I don't have anything planned for my birthday. It's going to be a Wednesday, so it's not even one of my regular stream days. Okay. Who is writing and reading and reading and writing? At least using the tonic. Ow. It's not loading. Okay. Was recently started, maybe? Oh, I see harps on. Ouch. So yeah, that's... So again, I will see you all next time. Well, next time being tomorrow, because I gotta have my fairy tales. That's just a given. What the heck is going on behind me? That was weird. Anyway. Follower message. Can't spell raid. My computer's already trying to freeze on me again. Okay. That. Ouch. Yeah, my computer is already acting up. Okay. I'll see you all next time. Have a good night. Say your prayers, little one. Don't forget, my son, to include everyone. Tuck you in, warm within, keep you free from sin till the Sandman he comes. Sleep with one eye open, gripping your pillow tight. Exit light, enter night. Take my hand, we're off to Never Never Land. Something's wrong, shut the
Okay, why is it not letting me do the raid?
Thoughts tonight, and they aren't of Snow White. Dreams of war, dreams of liars, dreams of dragons, fire, and the things that
Hello?
will bite.
Okay, there we go.
Sleep with one eye open, gripping your pillow
See you all next time.
tight. Exit light, enter night. Take my hand, we're off to Never Never Land. And now